Hello again. Regular viewers will perhaps have noticed that I sometimes mention Gujarati Hindus in Britain as being a pretty good example, along with Jews, of people who make their home in the country, practice their own religion, observe particular customs, work hard, and seldom cause any trouble to anybody. I'm aware that this plays into what is regarded by some as an unacceptable idea, that of the good immigrant, but there we are, it just so happens to be the case. I've talked in the past about the way that some crimes are associated with different ethnic groups. Burglary and football hooliganism, for instance, are offences committed almost without exception by young white working class males, in contrast to robberies from the person, which are predominantly a crime committed by young working class black males. I was thinking the other day about the role that religion might play in this, and started to look at the statistics for religion among prisoners in the United Kingdom. I found something very interesting, and I give a link to the statistics in the description to this video. Roughly 1% of the British population are Jews, and they make up 1% of the prison population. The same figures are true of Sikhs. So far, so good. Sikhs and Jews apparently are no more likely to commit crimes, no less likely than anybody else. Now let's look at Hindus and Muslims. Hindus make up 2% of the British population, but there are 0% in prison. Yes, that's right. Hindus don't end up in prison. The reason for this, I assume, is that they are too busy working and behaving like ordinary respectable citizens to hang around the streets shooting people or go off at night breaking into other people's homes. This confirms what I've long suspected, that Hindus make the most desirable neighbours, and I'm bound to say that given the choice of all ethnicities to live next door to, I would choose Gujarati Hindus every time. It is when we look at Islam that an alarm bell starts ringing. Muslims make up just 4% of the general population in Britain, and yet they comprise 16% of the prison population, which is quite extraordinary. And makes me wonder what's going on. After all, Islam forbids theft and murder and other crimes just as Christianity and Hinduism do. Why should those following this faith be 4 times as likely to end up in prison as their numbers in the population would suggest? One reason might be that an awful lot of Muslims in Britain seem to get caught up in sexual offences involving young girls. One thinks of the grooming gangs in different English cities, and these are, it is believed, merely the tip of the iceberg. It would be interesting to see a breakdown by offence of Muslim prisoners in the United Kingdom to see if this was a factor in the disproportionate number of Muslims who are locked up in this country. Could it be that they're not familiar with British culture and what is acceptable? One recalls the situation in Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Finland, and this does seem to hint at something of the sort. If you're not allowed to associate with females as a rule, and then suddenly you move to a country where you have the freedom to do so, it might take a while before you figure out what is okay and what is not. I can't help noticing, and it may be part of the same trend, the number of Muslim doctors in Britain who seem to end up in trouble for indecently assaulting women and girls. There was a particularly awful instance of this only the other day, where a newly qualified 25-year-old doctor called Jabir Rahman was sent to prison because he was trying to meet up with underage girls to have sex with them. One really cannot imagine a Hindu doctor carrying on like this. I'll give a link to the case below. I find this intriguing because the Hindus in Britain have their origins in India, and almost all the Muslims in the country have theirs in Pakistan and Bangladesh. In other words, all are from the Indian subcontinent originally. The only difference appears to lie in their religious faith. If only people were not so scared of being accused of racism and Islamophobia, I think there's scope here for some interesting research into why Hindus from the Indian subcontinent are an asset to the community and never end up in prison, and why so many Muslims from the same part of the world are anything but.